Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. There is nothing excites me about early morning light because it transforms the cityscape into a stunning visual pleasing painting. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. When it comes to drawing, I'll provide the drawing template and reference. Check my description to download it. So I always start with the big basic shapes, the secondary shapes and the tertiary shapes. And let's throw down our first wash. Since it's early morning scene, there's going to be a lot of warmth in our scene. So I'm using a lot of warmer colors. So I'll be using a lot of yellow ochre. I'm also using cadmium yellow and a little bit of Winsor yellow in my paint. So to create that warmth. And since it's early morning scene, there's going to be a lot of light permeates all across. So the color which is going to permeate all over painting would be a warmish tone, because since it's sunlight early in the morning, so it's going to be a lot of warmer tones. So you could use yellow ochre or cadmium yellow to brighten up the scene. But as it comes to the foreground, I'm going to keep it simple with a little bit of gradient to lead into the painting. And I'm also going to I'm trying to put this street walk, but it dried out quite drastically. As you can see, even though the washes are really darker when we put in, and it looks lighter now. So that's how watercolor works. The warmer tones goes really pale when you paint. So there are like two buildings there, and I'm making sure that I'm combining it, and I'm making sure there's a little bit of color. I'm also making sure the value is lighter, and I'm also introducing a lot of grays in my wash as well. And there is also a church which is sitting in the front of this big building, and I'm going to use a wet on wet technique so that it doesn't focus on our painting, because the main focus in this painting would be the shadows and the lights which is speaking from the background to the foreground. And watercolor is also a medium where you cannot like have unconnected shapes. So that's why when you paint in watercolors, try to think everything as shapes and try to blend everything together. And I'm also darkening up the church at the top, so I'm also connecting that shape to my midground buildings. So this is our first wash, so I'm just looking for the base colors of the building. So when I say the base color of the building, I meant like the lighter tone of the building, because we're going to do the secondary wash, and we also do a last wash with shadows in it. Being said that, whenever you paint in watercolors, try to put less details on the shadows and put more details on the lit areas. I fairly admit that one of the painful thing to paint in watercolors are the trees, because still I have difficulty painting it. So when you draw, when you're painting trees, there is three things should come in place. You have to do the first wash, second wash, and the third wash. So the first wash is the light green, which I put in on the trees, and you can see. And we'll do the second wash and the third wash after. So now I jumped on to the streetcar. So I want to do the first wash on my streetcar as well. And there's also a bus which is at the background. I'm also doing it as dark as possible because it's going to be on the darker side. So I also add the street poles, street lights. It's a basic color. And now I'm going to add the secondary details on the trees which are on the background. When it comes to adding secondary details, sometimes it might be a little bit hard to judge the value. So because we have to create a depth and distance from a lighter to the darker value. And this is the second wash I was talking about on the trees. So I'm using a little bit of warmth. So I'm using green as well as a little bit of cadmium orange in it, or any kind of orange you can mix with. And this is the third wash I was telling you about. I also sprayed the trees, and I'm also adding this French Ultramarine blue, the darker shadows. And you can see it also created this 3D volume now on the trees. So whenever you do trees, make sure that it reads 3D, but if it doesn't look 3D, it's gonna act as flat. So now I jumped on to the building second wash. So I'm using neutral gray for it. So I'm using a Payne's gray and a little bit of white pen in it so that I don't have a darker pigment consistency. And at the bottom, I'm making sure that I connect the shape at the bottom shadows. And you can see I'm also using my nails to bring back some of the textures in it. So now let's focus on the streetcar a little bit. So I'm trying to tighten up my streetcar because in the first wash I didn't put the lighter values on there. So this is our major figure, and I'm going to add him in the front because I also going to have a little bit of character in him. So he's also got up early in the morning, and he's a old guy, and he has a companion, like a tiny little dog. And I'm adding the darker value on the streetcar glasses. So in Toronto streetcars, it is quite reflective, and you can see it's a little bit tinted. You can see what's going on outside, but it's really hard to see what's going on inside from the outside. So I'm also adding a darker pigment just to see that where my streetcar sits. So this is the wash which will the sunlight to come through the foreground and the midground. So I'm going to use this wash all across, but I'm making sure it have to be really bright in the background. And you could see it looks severe now. So the easiest way to pick the colors from your watercolor paper is use tissue paper. So I'm going to dab it and take the colors which I don't want it, and I want to make sure that there is some kind of light peeking through from the background, so that creates a really beautiful shadows in the foreground. And I'm going to be starting the shadows from the characters in the midground. You can see as soon as we add the shadows, the whole scene is getting a 3D look, and the light and shadows, the lighting started getting up here. And there's also the tree, which is also casting a shadows in the foreground. And I'm using a lot of purple in it, with a little bit of grayness in it. And I also pre-wet the paper because I want the loose edges in the foreground. And you can see as soon as we add the shadows for the streetcar, and you can see the light started appearing in our painting as well. And for the shadows, I was using a little bit of Cobalt Turquoise and a little bit of Ultramarine Blue, and I also used a little bit of gray in as well. And our character, the main character who is sitting on the foreground, he is not reading that dark, so I added a little bit of wash on there. So now we finished the second wash now, and we're going to add the tertiary details. The tertiary details are the street poles, the street wires, and everything, which can act as a little bit of icing on the cake. So I'll never start with my tertiary details. I always start with the big major shapes, then start with the secondary shapes, then I start with the tertiary shapes. And now there's a lot of light coming from the background, and I lost it when I was when I was doing my washes, and I was solely focused on it. So this is a way you could bring back the eyelets back, and this also brings a little bit of character on the streetcar as well. And when you do this adding eyelets on top of it, it is frowned upon using white paint, but I also use Chinese white from the tube. So I don't, sometimes some people use gouache, but it's up to artist preference. So you can see quickly we blocked in the whole painting really fast, and you can see I also have these white wires. That also helps to create a little bit of lighting in our scene. And everything looks good. The streetcar, the front mirror, it doesn't have a 3D volume, so I have to add those eyelets in the right places. So every painting I do, I use this tape to see how my painting gonna look like, and it also gives this crisp corners and how it's going to be framed when the painting is done. So now it's your turn. Take my drawing template and reference, and let's see what you can come up with. Thanks again for watching this how to paint early morning cityscape video tutorial with me. Let me know what you guys think about this video in the comment section. If you want me to cover any of the subjects in watercolors, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or comment below. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And good luck with the painting, folks.